The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Daniel Carter stepped into the Willowbrook Cemetery, the iron gates creaking behind him like a warning. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the silence was so heavy it felt like a presence itself. He shouldn't have been here at dusk. Everyone in town knew the stories about Willowbrook after dark, but the rumors had gnawed at him for weeks. Whispers of laughter echoing from the oldest section of the graveyard, where the tombstones leaned like broken teeth. Daniel tightened his jacket around himself, his flashlight cutting a shaky path through the gathering shadows. He didn't believe in ghosts. At least he hadn't before today. But when Mrs. Henderson from the local diner swore she'd heard a child's laughter near the unmarked graves, his curiosity had overruled his skepticism. Then he heard it, faint, muffled, but unmistakable. A giggle, light and carefree, as if a child were hiding just out of sight. His blood turned to ice. The sound wasn't coming from between the graves. It was coming from inside one. His pulse hammered as he followed the noise to a sunken, moss-covered tombstone, the name long eroded by time. The earth above it was undisturbed, the grave sealed for decades, yet the laughter grew clearer as he knelt. A prank? Some cruel joke? His fingers brushed the cold soil, and for a heartbeat the laughter stopped. Then, as if in response to his touch, it came again, closer, clearer. A child's voice, whispering his name. Daniel recoiled, his breath coming in sharp gasps. This wasn't possible. No one could be buried alive here. Not for years, not laughing. But as the wind howled through the trees, something else caught his eye. A glint of metal near the base of the tombstone. A rusted iron ring, half buried, as if marking a door. His hands shook as he dug, dirt caking under his nails. The laughter had faded now, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against his ears. But he couldn't stop, not when he'd come this far. With one final tug, the ring gave way, and beneath it, hidden under layers of earth and time, was a small, perfectly preserved wooden box. And it was glowing. The glow from the box was faint, pulsing like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across Daniel's trembling hands. It wasn't electric. No, this light was something else. Something alive. The wood was smooth despite its age, carved with intricate symbols he didn't recognize. And when his fingers traced the edges, a whisper slithered into his mind, soft but insistent. Open me. His breath hitched. This wasn't just some forgotten trinket. This was a secret, buried for a reason. With a shaky exhale, he lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of yellowed cloth, was a toy soldier, its paint chipped, but its tiny face still smiling. Next to it lay a folded slip of paper, brittle with age. The moment Daniel touched the note, the air around him grew heavy, as if the graveyard itself was holding its breath. The handwriting was delicate, looping, a child's. I promise I'll come back. Don't forget me. Thomas. The name sent a jolt through him. Thomas, his grandfather's name. But that was impossible. His grandfather had died childless, or so he'd been told his entire life. No children, no family beyond Daniel's own father, who had passed years ago, leaving behind only silence about the past. A gust of wind howled through the trees, snapping him back to reality. The laughter was gone, but the weight of the note in his hands was worse. Who was this Thomas? And why had his grandfather's name been hidden in a grave that shouldn't exist? His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. The toy soldier's hollow eyes seemed to watch him, its grin suddenly sinister. Had it been left here as a message? A warning? Or was it something worse? A piece of a life that had been erased? Then he saw it. Engraved on the inside of the box's lid, nearly worn away by time, were two words. He remembers. Daniel's throat went dry. The graveyard around him felt darker now, the shadows stretching longer, as if they were reaching for him. He should leave, put the box back, walk away, and pretend he'd never heard the laughter. But the note, the name, the whispers, they clung to him, pulling him deeper into a mystery that was never meant to be uncovered. Because if Thomas was real, then everything he knew about his family was a lie. And if the grave had been waiting for him, what else was down there? The wind had picked up, howling through the skeletal trees like a chorus of the dead. But Daniel barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to the box in his hands, the note, and the name that unraveled everything. Thomas, his grandfather, supposedly his grandfather, had been a quiet man, a man of few words and even fewer stories. He had died when Daniel was just a boy, leaving behind little more than a pocket watch and a surname. No childhood tales, no old photographs, no hints of a past before he appeared in town one day, already middle-aged, already a mystery. Daniel had never questioned it, until now. He turned the toy soldier over in his palm, the weight of it too real, too tangible to dismiss. It wasn't just any toy. It was hand-carved, the kind of precious thing a child would cling to, would bury with a promise. "I'll come back." Had Thomas been the one to leave it here? Or had someone buried it for him? The dates didn't make sense. The grave was old, too old for his grandfather to have been a child when it was sealed. Unless, unless the name wasn't his grandfather's at all. Unless it belonged to someone else. A brother, a cousin, a son. The thought hit him like a physical blow. His grandfather couldn't have had a son. The family records were clear. No marriages, no children, just a solitary man who appeared out of nowhere and left just as quietly. But records could be falsified, histories could be rewritten, and graves could be hidden. Daniel's hands shook as he dug through the box again, desperate for another clue, another fragment of the truth. His fingers brushed against something cold and metallic at the very bottom. A key, small and tarnished, tied to a frayed ribbon. On it, etched in delicate script, was a single word: home. A sound broke through the silence, a rustling, too deliberate to be the wind. Daniel's head snapped up, his pulse roaring in his ears. The graveyard was empty, the shadows stretching long and twisted in the fading light. But he wasn't alone. He could feel it. The air was thick, charged, as if the very earth beneath him was holding its breath. And then from somewhere deep below, the laughter came again, fainter now, sadder. A child's voice, whispering words he couldn't quite make out. He should run. He knew he should run. But the key in his hand burned like a brand. And the note, the name, the lie, it was all too much to leave behind. Whoever Thomas was, he had been real. He had been here, and someone had gone to great lengths to make sure he was forgotten. Daniel's fingers closed around the key. He wouldn't let that happen. The key felt like a living thing in Daniel's pocket, its weight shifting with every step he took away from the graveyard, as if it were trying to guide him somewhere. He didn't know where home was, not the home the key referred to, at least, but his feet carried him instinctively toward the outskirts of town, where the old Carter house had stood abandoned for decades. His grandfather's house. The place no one ever spoke of. The place his father had refused to visit even when the roof caved in and the walls began to sag. It was as if the house itself were a ghost, a thing better left unacknowledged. The path to the property was overgrown, weeds clawing at his legs as he pushed through, the moon casting long skeletal shadows from the trees. When the house finally came into view, it was worse than he remembered. The porch sagged like a broken spine. The windows were eyes shattered by time, and the front door, painted a peeling, sickly green, seemed to grimace at him. But the key in his pocket hummed with a strange energy, as if it recognized this place, as if it had been waiting to return. The lock was rusted, but the key turned with an eerie smoothness, the click of the mechanism echoing through the hollow belly of the house. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of mildew, but beneath it, something else lingered. The faint, sweet smell of old wood and candle wax, the ghost of a memory. Daniel's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a hallway lined with faded wallpaper, its pattern blurred by decades of damp. At the end of the hall, a staircase ascended into shadow. The banister splintered but still standing, and there, tucked beneath the stairs, was a door. Small, unassuming, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. A child's door. His breath came shallow as he approached, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. The door had no lock, just a simple latch, but something about it made his skin prickle. This was a secret place, a hiding place. the kind of place where things or people could be forgotten. With a trembling hand, he pulled the door open, and the beam of his flashlight spilled into a tiny, dust-choked room. Inside was a child's bed, its mattress rotted to threads, a small desk, its surface scarred with knife marks and ink stains, and on the wall, barely visible beneath layers of grime, were pencil lines marking the growth of a boy. Thomas. The name whispered through Daniel's mind like a curse. This was his room. This was where he had lived, where he had been hidden. And then Daniel saw it, the photograph. Taped to the wall beside the bed, its edges curled with age, was a faded image of a boy no older than 10, his smile wide and bright, his eyes full of a life that had been stolen from him. Standing beside him, a hand on his shoulder, was a man Daniel recognized instantly, his grandfather. The truth crashed over him like a wave. Thomas hadn't just been a name in a grave. He had been real. He had been here, and someone, his own family, had erased him. From somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard creaked. Daniel wasn't alone. The creaking noise slithered through the silence of the house like something alive, and Daniel froze, his fingers tightening around the photograph. Dust motes swirled in the beam of his flashlight, catching the light like tiny ghosts, and for a moment, the air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against his skin with an almost physical weight. He wasn't imagining things. There was no wind inside this rotting house, no reason for the floors to groan on their own. Someone, or something, was here with him. His pulse hammered in his throat as he turned, sweeping the flashlight across the hallway. The darkness seemed to push back, swallowing the light before it could reach the corners. Then a sound, soft, barely there, a child's whisper, so faint it could have been the house settling. But Daniel knew better now. The laughter in the graveyard, the name on the note, the photograph of a boy who shouldn't exist. It was all connected. And whatever was in this house with him, it wasn't leaving until he understood why. The whisper came again, clearer this time, a single word drifting from the shadows near the staircase. Daniel. His blood turned to ice. It knew his name. He should run. Every instinct screamed at him to get out, to leave this cursed house and its secrets behind. But his legs wouldn't move. The photograph in his hand felt like it was burning, the eyes of the boy in the image boring into him, pleading. Thomas had been here. He had lived in this room, slept in this bed, grown up in this house, only to vanish into the earth with nothing but a toy soldier and a promise. Daniel couldn't leave now, not when he was so close to the truth. Steeling himself, he stepped out of the tiny room and into the hallway. The whisper had come from upstairs. The staircase loomed ahead, its steps sagging with age, the shadows at the top impenetrable. He forced himself forward, each creak of the wood beneath his feet sounding like a scream in the silence. The air grew colder as he climbed, the temperature dropping until he could see his breath fogging in front of him. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched into darkness, doors lining either side like sentinels. One of them stood slightly ajar, a sliver of deeper blackness visible through the gap. The whispering was coming from behind that door. Daniel's hands shook as he reached for the knob, the metal so cold it seared his skin. He pushed the door open slowly, the hinges screeching in protest. The room beyond was empty save for a single piece of furniture, a rocking chair, its paint chipped and faded, moving gently back and forth as if someone had just been sitting there. The sight of it sent a wave of primal fear through him. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. And then he saw the writing on the wall. Scrawled in what looked like charcoal, the letters shaky and uneven, was a message. He promised he'd come back for me, but he lied. The rocking chair creaked. A gust of frigid air rushed through the room, extinguishing the flashlight and plunging Daniel into total darkness. In that moment, he felt a small, icy hand slip into his. Thomas wasn't just a memory. He was here. The touch of that small, frozen hand sent a jolt through Daniel's body like an electric shock. Every nerve screaming at him to pull away, to flee from this impossible moment. But the grip tightened with a strength that belied its childlike size, holding him fast in the suffocating darkness. The air smelled suddenly of damp earth and old wool, the scent of a boy long buried but never at rest. Daniel's voice abandoned him. His throat clenched around a scream that wouldn't come. He could feel Thomas beside him now, a presence so real it made the hairs on his neck stand rigid. The child wasn't speaking, wasn't laughing anymore, just standing there in the blackness, waiting. Then as suddenly as it had come, the grip loosened. The flashlight flickered back to life, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The room was empty again, the rocking chair still, but something had changed. On the floorboards at Daniel's feet, where nothing had been before, lay a tattered sheet of music, its notes faded but still legible. A lullaby. The title, written in delicate cursive, made his stomach drop. For Thomas, who dreams too much. He knew this handwriting, his grandmother's. A woman who, according to family records, had never existed. The pieces were coming together now, forming a picture so terrible he could barely breathe. His grandfather had had a family, a wife, a son, but something had happened. Something that made them disappear. Something that required lies etched into official documents and a child's name buried in an unmarked grave. Daniel's hands trembled as he folded the music sheet into his pocket, the paper brittle as dried leaves. He needed to see the rest of the house. Every room, every hidden corner. Thomas was leading him somewhere, showing him the truth piece by terrible piece. The attic. The realization struck him like a physical blow. Old houses like this always hid their worst secrets in the attic. Daniel turned back toward the hallway, but stopped dead at the top of the stairs. The photograph he'd found earlier, the one of Thomas and his grandfather, now lay on the floor, torn cleanly down the middle. Only the boy's half remained, his smiling face staring up from the dust. The message was clear. Thomas had been cut out of this family, erased. But why? The pull toward the attic was undeniable now, a compulsion that thrummed in his bones. The access panel was in the ceiling of the second-floor hallway, its pull cord dangling like a hangman's noose. Daniel yanked it down, and the ladder unfolded with a groan that echoed through the hollow heart of the house. The air that spilled from the opening was frigid and thick with the scent of cedar and something else. Something metallic and old. Blood. He climbed. The attic was a tomb of forgotten things. Trunks spilling yellowed linens, a crib coated in decades of dust, a small pair of shoes placed neatly beside a rust-stained blanket. But it was the far wall that made Daniel's legs give way. Someone had painted a mural there, a sprawling, childlike depiction of a family. A man, a woman, and a boy, their hands linked. Above them, crude letters spelled out, "Forever and ever." But the paint had been violently scratched away in places, the woman's face obliterated, the man's figure scored through with deep, angry gouges. Only the boy remained untouched, his smile wide and bright. And beneath the mural, etched into the floorboards, a single sentence. "Papa said I had to stay quiet, but the bad man came anyway." The truth crashed over Daniel like a wave. Thomas hadn't just been forgotten, he'd been sacrificed. The attic's revelation left Daniel gasping, his hands pressed against the rough floorboards as if he could physically push the horror away. The words carved into the wood pulsed in his vision. The bad man came anyway. And suddenly the laughter from the grave took on a new, terrible meaning. It wasn't the sound of a child playing. It was the sound of a child pretending to play, the way children do when they're trying to drown out things too awful to name. The toy soldier, the note, the mural. They weren't just clues. They were a trail of breadcrumbs left by a boy who had been taught to hide, to stay quiet, to vanish without a trace. Daniel stumbled back down the ladder, the house groaning around him like a living thing in pain. There was one place left to look, the willow tree, the massive old tree in the backyard that had appeared in the corner of Thomas's mural, its branches drawn like grasping fingers. His grandfather had forbidden anyone from going near it, claiming its roots were unstable. Another lie. The backyard was a jungle of thorns and rotting fence posts, the moon casting long, twisted shadows. The willow stood at its center, ancient and gnarled, its leaves whispering secrets to the wind. As Daniel approached, the temperature plummeted. His breath fogged in the air, and the ground beneath his feet grew spongy, as if the earth itself was resisting his steps. Then he saw it, a patch of disturbed soil at the base of the tree. darker than the rest. Not a grave, not exactly, but a hiding place. He fell to his knees, digging with bare hands, dirt cramming under his nails. The smell of damp earth gave way to something older, something sour and wrong. His fingers brushed against cloth, rotted but still holding its shape. A small bundle tied with cord. The moment he touched it, the wind died. The world went utterly silent. Inside the bundle was a child's nightshirt, stiff with age and stained brown. Wrapped within it was a single sheet of paper, the ink blurred by time but still legible. A letter, not from Thomas. "My dearest Joseph," it began, his grandfather's name. "If you're reading this, you've broken your vow. You promised to let him go. You promised never to speak his name. But the bad man is watching. He's always watching. If you come looking, he'll take you too. Burn this. Forget us. It's the only way to live." The signature was a single, trembling initial. E, his grandmother. A branch snapped behind him. Daniel turned, the letter crumbling in his grip. Under the willow's swaying branches, a figure stood, not the shadow of a child, but a man. Tall, hollow-cheeked, his grandfather's face but wrong, stretched too tight over the bones. The bad man, and he was smiling. Thomas's laughter rang out one final time, high and bright and terrified, as the roots of the willow tree began to move.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.